Protesters have staged a series of demonstrations across France to mark the first anniversary of the Yellow Vest movement. Police turned water cannon on activists in Paris, but the protesters targeted a bank. The Yellow Vest actions peaked at the end of last year, bringing hundreds of thousands onto the streets to oppose high living costs and inequality. But the numbers of people taking part have since fallen. DW correspondent Lisa Lewis is in Paris following all the developments there for us. So, Lisa, what have you been seeing? What have protesters been doing, and what are their demands?
Well, the protesters were trying to march through Paris, but when they arrived at Place d'Italie, which is in southern Paris, the police blocked off that square, so they wouldn't let them move on. They started destroying things, and that's why the police then called off the authorization for that demo that was planned in the center of Paris. Now, when you look at these people, it's very difficult to say who they are. It looks like a mix of all sorts of people: black blocs, anarchists, and also a more moderate yellow vests. What's clear is that there's now a real standoff between the police and the protesters here in Paris.
Well, we should remind our viewers that this movement began a year ago. It was sparked by higher fuel prices that the government introduced. People put on those vests and took first to the streets to protest the fuel prices, but then it morphed into a broader protest with every Saturday hundreds of thousands of people going out on the streets to protest against the government more broadly. But Lisa, just how much support does this movement have today?
Well, there is still more than half of the French are still supporting the movement, according to a poll, but more than 60% of the French are saying we don't want them to continue to protest. So apparently, this underlying lack of trust of the government, but also this unhappiness about where the society is heading is still there. But when you look at the streets, look at what's happening every Saturday, there are very few protesters. Today was going to be a big day, but even for today, the police were only expecting thousands of protesters, which is obviously not very much across France, compared to what happened in the very beginning, as you just said, where you could see hundreds of thousands in the streets. That has really trickled down, although this underlying sentiment of unhappiness is still there.
All right, so if there is this underlying sentiment of dissatisfaction with the current government, what's been the government's response? Lisa, how has France changed a year on?
Well, the government reacted to the protests. They withdrew this controversial fuel tax. They also introduced some other measures. For example, they increased the minimum wage, but it looked like, they could do whatever they wanted. The protesters would never really be happy, because what this protest is about, what these protests are about, is really about a model of society that they don't like. They don't want all these reforms, but the government is just, continuing to do them. For example, just a few weeks ago, the government implemented a new reform to reform the unemployment benefit system. Quite a tough reform, really. They've just done that. They're about to reform the pension system. They're just continuing their reform plan as Emmanuel Macron, the president, had announced before the elections, and that hasn't really changed. And that's also why people, continue to be unhappy and dissatisfied with the government.
DW's Lisa Lewis reporting for us from Paris. Thank you very much.